Welcome to the Free Range Families Podcast, where we, Britt
and Christina, show you the beauty of homeschooling through a lens of faith
and freedom,
and always a bit of humor. Welcome back to the Free Range Family Podcast with Britt and Christina.
And so for today, we're tackling something that came up in our homeschool
orientation.
Yep.
Right? We had our orientation this weekend, and one of the biggest questions from people was
that they're afraid you're going to mess up your kiddo.
Yeah.
Like they're going to mess up their kiddo.
Yeah. I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
What am I?
And it to us, we don't think this is even like an issue, but we decided to tackle it today because it seems to be a resonating fear.
I get it though, because it was an issue. Like that thought always goes into your head when you're first starting something. And I think it's with anything that we do as a parent. Like that's just a parent fear of, I'm going to mess up my kid.
Yeah, like, I do.
But
it also depends on it. So we're going to go into like the background. It mostly resonates with parents that have been public schooled. So
correct.
If they're in the system, then they think that things are going to be so wildly different that they're not going to be, living up to the standards of the state, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's going to end up making your child weird and messing them up for the rest of their life. But to me, I was like, heck no, I'm leaving and they're going to be so much cooler.
So I think one of the biggest fears people have is the socialization fear.
Yes.
And I know we've talked about this in various episodes. We've touched on it.
Yeah.
But I think socialization is like everybody's number one fear. When you say like homeschool kids, immediately people think, oh, weird. They can't talk to people. They don't know how to act in a group. Like it is such a false stigma.
No, it is.
Like, it's not real.
I know. And I can't wait till we get to bring our own kids on so we can like show everybody. But it is. And it stems from this. It's a different mentality entirely. So you have to understand that when you go in, and this is true. I know I have like big words for it, but I call it social contagion. So in the public school realm, you are uniformed. And so your kids have to fit, even though inclusion is like the big talk, it's really exclusion.
Right.
So if you're wearing rain boots and a cowboy hat to school, you're already going to be kind of put into a category. And so they try to uniform you into this. And this ties into socialization, because to us, socialization is having our children become individuals before they go out and just really connecting with one person.
Right.
Or something. Or we could go back to Flipper and he connected with a dolphin, and that's okay with me.
I think socialization is often misconstrued because, I mean, in reality, when we were teachers in a public setting, we didn't have the privilege of letting our kids socialize. Like there wasn't time in my 42 minutes of science class.
No, that's what I'm talking about. It's
socialization.
It's uniformity.
It was, yes, they had ability to work with people. They had to learn how to work in groups with labs and different, experiments that I did in science.
But then that can go into a whole nother realm of like SEL. If your kid's not able to work in a team environment, then we can tackle that later.
But I think people misconstrue working in a group setting with socialization. And they are not one and the same. So socialization, being able to talk to people ages toddler through, 95, whatever, that's socialization.
No, it is.
Being able to carry on a conversation, being able to look someone in the eye when you carry on said conversation, listening skills.
Yeah.
Actually being able to listen and digest what a person is saying and respond to them as opposed to just giving kind of rote.
Well, and then just regurgitating what you hear. So this is,
right.
It's a difference of critical thinking entirely. But that also ties into the fear of, so when you have socialization, then it's, are my children going to be weird? And the two go hand in hand. And I think the weird thing is just, what is weird, right? We've asked this
Everyone's
before.
Everyone's weird. Everyone's normal. Like, there is no such thing.
But reminiscing back on when my oldest started kindergarten, because it went into the public school system, he was totally okay with wearing rain boots and a cowboy hat to school. But within a year of him being in that environment, he had already made it up in his mind that this was not appropriate, or I was the weirdo. And so I have to start changing the way I dress, changing what I eat in my lunchbox. Oh my gosh.
Conformity.
Yes, 100%. Because it's like a synthetic family. So it's not, you have to know who you are. I mean, we've heard it all the time. Before you can love somebody else, you have to know who you are. It's the same when socialization happens. The kids need to be able to understand who they are so that they can connect with somebody and they're comfortable with themselves. So if parents are worried about this and they're screwed about going into homeschooling because you're going to mess your child up because they're going to be weird, unsocial people, it's actually completely opposite. This is just something that you hear. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and then there's a whole bunch of other things. So go ahead and go down that list.
All right. So we compiled a list of everything that we heard through the orientation and just in general when we talk to parents. The next big thing that I hear a lot because I have the older kids is, but what do we do teen years to college? Like, how do our teenagers get the there's a couple of levels to that. How do I teach a teenager? Because what if I'm not feeling like I'm skilled enough to teach their level? And then there's, how do I make sure that they get all the experiences that I got as a teenager, the proms, the sports, all of that.
And then have to uncondition yourself a little bit from the norm to a certain extent.
Or you find yourself a co-op that decides to put on a formal dance and the kids have a grand old time. And sure, it's not a 200-person prom. It's a 25, 30-person prom. But honestly, they had more fun at that than I have ever seen kids have at an actual prom.
I know.
And I've chaperoned proms before.
If you think about it, because we did do this whole formal for our homeschool group, and it was amazing. Every one of those kids was comfortable with themselves, and so that ties into the socialization thing. And then we had this prom and they were dancing. I mean, how many times do you go to a prom and nobody dances?
I mean, I'm not kidding. My son, my 15-year-old,
I know.
I think he opened and closed the dance floor with his girlfriend. Like, they didn't get off the dance floor. It was hilarious.
And it was awesome.
It was. And then also, like, how do you transition those teen years? How do you get your teen ready for college? Can a homeschool kid go to college?
Yeah. And colleges love homeschool kids.
I went to college.
Colleges love homeschool kids.
They do.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. And they do because they can critically think and they test better. I mean, you can pull all the stats up on this if you are a stat person, but knowing your own kid. The other thing is, like, I did graduate high school in a, traditional graduation kind of thing and then went on to college. But Christina, you got your GED, right?
Yep.
And then
I homeschooled. I left high school because I was doing a bunch of stuff. And then just decided, I'm going to sit for my GED and got into multiple Ivy League colleges on scholarship and got to choose where I wanted to go.
So that's another stigma that we were trying to help new families understand, is that you're not going to mess up your kiddos and that they are able to get through their teen years and go into college perfectly fine.
And another thing that I just want to say, because I have teens who play sports and do different things, most states allow your homeschooler to be a part of, like, extracurricular activities, whether it's clubs or sports. So like my son, he joined our local high school's swim team last year and he was a part of it. And I mean, it was a wonderful experience for him.
There's actually statutes, like legally.
Legally, he has to be allowed to do it.
Well, and that
but they also welcomed him.
Because of taxes. For paying into the public school system, then they have to be allowed to play sports.
And you know what? He wasn't the only one. There were other, you always think like, oh gosh, my kid's going to be the only one. No, they're not. And it's a lot more common than you think. And they bring such a great perspective to the teams as well. And they learn a lot. So it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that you can do that.
And you don't have to join a school. There's like club. Right. I mean, we do things outside of that too. So the physical activity and making sure your kiddos are in those teen groups is not really an issue. If you're one of those parents that really wants, I'm not saying like a copycat of a public school system, but you want something like graduation and that kind of thing, then you can find a co-op that, facilitates that. So then moving down through here, the other thing that we heard was that they were afraid their children, this one always cracks me up. And it's not because I understand it, because I came from the system. I get it. And we're both teachers, right? So we lived this, but they're so afraid that their kids are not going to live up to the standards of the district or the state, And so how do we make sure our children are learning up to par?
Well, first off, I just want to say, if you're worried that your kids are not going to live up to the standards, first off, look at the standards of your school district and look at where they're falling in the range of how they're teaching kids.
There is a bit of you have to uncondition that mindset too. So,
but it's not hard, and I think because of my background as a public high school teacher, I tend to kind of look at those standards a little bit more. Yeah. But it's funny that my first year of homeschooling, I really was like, I need to make sure.
Oh, me too.
I am following these, and I am good.
I was pulling up all the standards for social studies and everything when I first
check, making.
Yep, we're going through here,
check.
And then that just kind of goes, out the door.
Yeah. So now, I've looked at the standards. I know what the standards are.
Yeah.
And I've surpassed the standards for my kids, because the standards, in my opinion, are the minimum.
No, they are.
And I want to do better than the standards for my kids.
And I don't have my phone with this awesome quote, but it was something along the lines of, you're setting the standards for your kids because you know them. Mm-hmm. So you really have to, understand that what they're learning at home far surpasses what they're learning in public school, because there's so much wasted time too. Oh, yeah. So your standards are probably going to be elevated. So that's another one we heard. And then there's one path to success. Okay, so this was okay, fine. I'm homeschooling my little one. I'm teaching him how to read.
Easy.
I'm teaching him multiplication facts. Okay. But then once we get to, upper level middle school, high school, parents are kind of freaking out a little bit. And
how do I get them into college?
Yeah.
How do I get them there?
I'm kind of at this point with Ryan where, once he gets to calculus, so I took AP Calc, but there's no way I can teach it. Okay, I just can't do it.
I know.
I'm humble enough to say that I can sit in a classroom and I can learn AP Calculus, but I'm not going to be able to teach it to my son. If he is in that math kind of trajectory, where do I go? How do I do this? So the fear that there's only one path and they have to go to an institution to learn these things is another one that we have to smash now.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there are so many ways that you can look at success.
Yes.
And one of those ways is, obviously, you have traditional teaching. Mm-hmm. Fine. That works for some. But even in schools now, they are going more into online education.
Yep.
They're learning through videos.
Which you can't, I don't care what anybody says, learning math through a TV is so hard.
It's really hard.
It's almost impossible.
But if you have kids that are in upper level math, kids can do dual enrollment. Yep. They can take community college classes. They can go to universities and take classes. That's actually what I was going to hint on. Once
you get to that math point and moms and dads you can enroll them in a community course, and
Absolutely.
They can learn from an instructor that's qualified to teach calculus, if that's a trajectory they're going down. But you can also have them learning at home.
And talk about socialization. I went to college when I was 16. Yeah. I was sitting in class with everything from 18 to 26-year-olds. In one of my classes, I paired up as a 16-year-old with a 26-year-old because we were the youngest and the oldest in the class, and we felt so awkward. And it was such a great experience because she and I were able to connect.
Yep.
And have something in common, even though it was opposite ends of the spectrum, but that's socialization.
Well, and that's what our kids get on a daily basis. Because
exactly.
in homeschooling, you're not tied down to a certain age group. So that comes back to this. You are tied, you don't just, socialize with kids that are 10 if you're a 10-year-old. You have kids that are older. In fact, my daughter, most of her friends are older. My son, mm-hmm. most of her friends are older. Jace, I don't know yet. He's a wild animal.
They're all over the place there.
But they are able to have empathy for little kids and, be able to talk to older children. So then when you do get into that situation in college, it's not an easy transition. Yep.
It's not awkward at all. So you have those options. And then obviously getting into college, like we talked about, you have your GED. As a homeschool student, you create your own transcripts for your kids. And again, people are like, but how does anybody know that you actually did it? Well, there is also this lovely little thing we call trust. Mm-hmm. Just as the colleges have to trust the public schools that they are teaching the material that they say they're teaching, they also have to trust parents. And most of them do because, again, if you look at the statistics, homeschool kids generally test better, do better.
And I think I would be hopeful that if you're making things up on your transcript, that's not going to set your child up for success if they're trying to apply to college.
Right.
So like realistically, we're not going to make anything of that up because they won't have a good chance.
Exactly.
But there are methods. Like I know we have used like AOP in the past for curriculums, but Ryan's program automatically generates a report card. So there are things that are easy. And I did that for a reason, is because I have his transcript at home and I can add in, obviously they play music, right? So that's like music or weightlifting or wrestling. And so you can add in those extracurriculars. But then at the end of the day, it does generate a report card. So I can put that all together, and then it's like a double whammy.
Right. Yeah. And then you also have to think about things like you have AP credits.
Oh, yeah.
That you can take an AP test. You can do so many. I just want to stress that we have this mindset that there is one path to success, one path of kindergarten through 12th grade onto college. And then once you have that, then your path to adulthood is there. And there are so many.
College is not for everybody.
It's not for everyone.
That is something that looking back.
Trade schools are a great option.
Oh, no. I mean, we both went to college.
Yep.
And I'm kind of using my degree in a way, right? I'm teaching my own kids. But it costs a lot of money. So that's the other thing, is that college is not for everybody, because my husband is wildly successful and he did not go to college, and you don't have to. So you really, homeschooling gives you an opportunity to understand your children too. If they're not interested in going the math route, why force them to learn calculus? I mean, that's kind of, I'm being super honest, but when you're in high school, you have so many, what is it called? Things you have to, on
a certain amount of credits that you have to have.
Yeah. So,
but there's alternative math, like taking business math.
Yep.
There's other things that you can do. Finance. Mm-hmm. Those are also life skills that kids should have.
Yeah. Well, I know, isn't Zen really interested in real estate?
He's interested in
a pathway in business.
Yeah, owning real estate and entrepreneurship. So this year, his math focus, because he's actually met all of the requirements, the standards for math already. He finished that in 9th grade. So now in 10th grade, he's doing finance and business math, and then he's going to move on to entrepreneurship, and he's actually going to start working in our businesses.
Yep.
With the books, so that he learns how to run a business financially.
Yeah. No, and they don't, and actually it doesn't, that model of flexibility and kind of making your own pathway, I think homeschooling is the only place that you can actually facilitate that. I don't think that there's another, even when I was thinking about college, I had to fulfill a math requirement at the university. And so I was picking through all these things going, I just don't want to do this anymore. Like, why do I need to learn this? And I ended up picking statistics.
Ooh.
Bad news.
Ouch.
Bad news for me.
It
was so bad.
Although my best friend's an accountant and she loves statistics.
Yeah,
so
but some people are formed for that. I am not. And so it just seemed pointless, but we're spending money, and that's the path that they had set out for.
But I just want to touch on what you said, that you had to pick something, and so you randomly picked something. That's college in general. I was pre-med, and I had to pick a fine arts class. And so the only thing that fit into my schedule with everything else that I was doing was a ballet class. I took ballet for 13 years growing up.
So cool.
And when I got there the first day of class.
We would have been friends.
We would have been.
I know.
When I got to the first day of class, the person who was supposed to play the piano for the ballet class had to drop out. And the ballet instructor, she was like, does anybody in this class know how to play piano? And I was like, I've played classical piano since I was 2. And she's like, great, sit down. So instead of actually taking the class that I paid for, I played piano and got my credit for that class by playing piano every day.
That's totally cool.
But seriously, I paid for that.
I know.
I paid money. I paid good money for that.
We would have been dancing together.
It was insane. But that's what I'm saying, is that there are other alternative ways for success that we have to get out of this mindset that
it's a boxed-in mindset.
This is the only way to do it. And the only way to be successful is to make sure they have all of these courses and it's all lined up.
But that's purposeful. It's my whole
I know.
and that's another episode entirely. But just to hint on that, the reason it's so boxed in and there's so much conformity is because it's a control aspect. So if we can, put all these minds in the pool and then we're in charge. So pretend we're the big people in charge of education. We're in charge of figuring out their trajectory. We're going to make it go the direction we want. So rather, let's pull them out and, we're the renegades that are fighting the system. But we have whatever pathway we want to, and that's free market, in my opinion. Okay. We're
business owners, we're entrepreneurs, and we don't really conform very well.
No. Well, and I don't co-parent with the government.
We don't co-parent with the government at all. All right. So I think the other questions that people... so this is a really good one, and this will lead to some other episodes that we're going to do, is a lot of people are very concerned, but what if my kid has special needs? What if they are gifted? What if they are twice exceptional? What if they, have dyslexia or dysgraphia or ADHD? What do I do? I can't handle this.
Yeah, that's a big one. And we'll hit on this too, because that's a big one for both of us.
There are so many strategies, and I can't stress enough that if you have an exceptional kid, homeschooling is the number one thing that you could do for them.
It really is. Yeah.
Hands down.
100%.
Hands down, the number one thing you could do for them. But also, what makes you feel that you can't teach your child having gone through the public school system? So the biggest fear from people who have gone through the public school system, I'm not equipped to teach my child. And I want to say, okay, but so you're telling me the system that you went through did not equip you.
I know, it's so
to teach your child.
It's crazy, the irony there.
We are so conditioned to believe that we are unable to do this.
Yes.
And yet we live in a time where there are more resources than ever.
No, not just the resources. I think it goes back to, obviously we talked about changing your mindset, but in the very beginning, and this is my faith, but God equipped you to teaching your own children. So when did we, and it's not even in scripture, when did we think that somebody else or some institution would be more equipped than we are in teaching our own children? And I think one family asked me the same question, that they're afraid they don't have the tools in their bandwagon to, do the management at home and teach so-and-so that's this age and teach so-and-so that's this age because they don't have the training. We're teachers, and I'm just going to go out on a limb here, but
you don't get trained.
Decertified teachers. I'm serious, because the thing is there are some things that we can pull from managing our classroom, how to, as far as special needs, how to approach different learning styles, that kind of thing. But when you're teaching your own kiddo, it's really just your connection with them and you knowing who they are.
It's understanding that you're not in a classroom.
Yeah.
And that you don't need to teach like you're in a classroom.
Oh, you should not try to replicate the system.
You're not doing the job of a teacher in the traditional sense.
No.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's not what your kid needs. That's not what homeschooling is. You're educating a love of learning. You're teaching a love of learning. You're teaching self-awareness. You're teaching them skills to then go on and be able to learn and educate themselves throughout their entire life, as opposed to here's this rote memorization.
Well, and that goes back to what is education?
Right.
So, as teachers, we heard what education was according to everybody else. And education, though, is really the love of learning. So, and applying knowledge to the real world. And in my mind, it's not the rote things, because a lot of time that's just, okay, this is a red pen. Okay, that's a light. Okay, there's a cumulonimbus cloud. But then where does it all fit together? And so that's not real education. That's just memorizing random facts. And that's what they give you the formative every Friday, and they test you on it. And then you never see it again. And half the kids don't remember it.
Absolutely.
So I think that smashing all of these stigmas, from socialization to not being equipped to handle your teens, the learning needs of your children, not living up to standards, and that we're conditioned to thinking that there's one path. This is all something that you should really realize is just something that's been fabricated over years of thinking homeschooling is opposite of what you think, and it's weird.
Right. And it's literally something that we've been conditioned to think through media, through movies and books and TV shows. I mean, like,
and how many ask yourself why?
Yeah.
Why have we been conditioned to think that? So that's part of the reason that we love this podcast, is because we do have the background where we came from the system. We saw the bureaucracy, right? We saw all the ins and outs, but we're able to be on the outside and say, hey, we were a product of that environment, and we're telling you that it's not right and it's not purposeful.
And it's not the only way.
No, it's not the only way. No, hands down, not the only way. I think that in one way, you can think if you have your family and they're the most important things to you. So this is my big spot on family. And your kids are individualized and you want to raise them up in God's light, all of these things that are important to you, sending them into a synthetic family, which is the school system, which, in turn, if you have a really dysfunctional situation, that's maybe helpful in some instances. But if we pull back that curtain and really change our perspective to focus on family, then everything else falls into place. So it does. And so then I don't know. Do you have anything else to add to?
I mean, if you want to talk about fear
of
messing up your if you want to talk about fear of messing up your kid,
yeah.
I mean, you're talking that you're worried that if you keep your child at home and you have a say in who they are hanging out with, you have a say in the extracurriculars they do, you have a say in how they're learning and who they're learning from,
yes,
that you're going to mess them up. But you're not scared that if you send them out for 8 hours a day and you have no control over that, you're not worried about that aspect of messing up your kid? Because, I mean, you could look at this both ways.
I think I said that.
Saying.
Why would I want to put my child on a school bus? Okay, this is how I think about this. It was also, I remember Ryan being like, I want to ride the school bus. I want to ride the school bus.
But it's with kids and buses. I
was like, okay, sure, honey, we'll ride the school bus. Why would I want you to put you on a school bus? And now he looks back and thinks it's crazy. And then you learn all this stuff that you really don't want your kiddo learning. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's be honest, all right? Because that happens. And then they go to school for 6-7 hours a day, and they're learning more stuff that you don't want them to learn. Or
especially now, that they have access to their phones and they're always on them during class time, which is that's
when we left the system, I mean, I left before COVID made it cool to homeschool or like popular, right? Or everybody got a taste of what homeschooling might be like, kind of. I don't know. Yeah. Computer's not really homeschooling. No. But it did increase the populace of homeschoolers a little bit after COVID, but we pulled before COVID. And I had a thought and I don't know, and it just flew away. But there was a purpose to this conversation.
We'll figure it out at some point.
No.
It'll be like 3 episodes from now. You have to remind me what I was
talking about. And that's a blooper reel. Right there.
That's totally a blooper reel, but we're going to just roll with it anyway because this is real life, people.
So, no, but we were...
It's a blooper reel.
We were talking about undoing everything.
Undoing it all.
So, why would I want to have my kiddo in school where I'm just going to have to spend so much time undoing the things that they're learning in school? And this is my thought process. When I left the school system, my reasoning were much different than a lot of parents are pulling them out today. So, the thought that they were being boxed in, that his education wasn't where it should be, the pathway there, that my daughter was struggling in reading, that we weren't fixing the system. Class sizes were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And today, I don't know, it's like 38 students in a class. That's babysitting. That's insane to me. But there's so many reasons why we left. But today, the reasons I would say you got to be crazy to send your kid to public school today? Can I just put that out there? No, I'm serious.
Hey, we're all allowed our own opinions, and if you don't like our opinions,
I want to send my kid to school because they have grooming, and let's just face it. There's so many political things interwoven into the curriculum, from
it's not just reading, writing, and arithmetic anymore.
To, comprehensive sex ed, and we have tons of stuff on that. But the reasons that I left compared to the reasons parents are pulling them out today should be like a red flag warning. I'm not going to be able to undo all of the stuff that they're learning in schools. So
absolutely,
I don't have to. In fact, what I can do though is teach my kids that this exists, and then teach them how to discern later on.
And I think that's just a great point that I want to touch on very quickly, is that you said something right there. I teach them that it exists, and then I move on. We're not sheltering our kids from the real world as a like, oh, you're sheltering your kid. You're creating a bubble around them. It's like, no, we are helping them be able to critically think and discern what morality is.
And that's the salt and light argument. You're going to send your kid out into the,
and even be able to just understand
battleground without a weapon.
You're teaching your child to be able to understand the world around them from different viewpoints
and experiences
and all of that. I remember, even and this, we're not bashing public schools. I'm saying all schools, all schools, whether they're government
schools.
I'm not just saying, but I'm saying it's not just government schools. It's private schools as well. It's religious schools sometimes.
But Christina, that's because the big guys on top are they're still
mandating.
Yeah, even down to the private.
The bureaucracy is still there.
It's there.
So I remember my kids coming home from private school, a private Christian school, and still coming home and being like, so this was said. And we have to sit down almost every night and go through it.
Yeah, I can't even.
It's amazing.
I'm pretty sure that what was said on mine, I'm going to knock my microphone over here, is too inappropriate to say on camera. But I get what you're going.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because what's okay in somebody's house
is not
your home.
And it's something that we talk about. We talk about all these issues with our kids, especially as they're getting older. Mm-hmm. Now that I have teenagers, we talk about a lot of hard-hitting issues.
Yes.
But then we also ask them to bring in their critical thinking skills, their experiences, their perspectives, their lived, ideas that they have grown up with, and said, okay, what do you actually think about this?
Yes.
Because I don't want it to just be what we think and we're pushing what our thoughts are on them. I want them to critically think. And if they argue and disagree with us, great, but you better be able to back it up.
No. And so coming full circle on that, if you're afraid of homeschooling because you're afraid of messing up your kid, you're afraid of them not being socialized, you're afraid of them being weird, you're afraid of them, you're afraid of your ability to create a transcript and send them to college or whatever.
You're afraid of fitting into society.
You have to really look at why you're pulling your child, and every reason, I can probably say this, every reason why you think you're going to pull your kids means that you're more equipped than you think.
Agreed.
Yeah. What do you think?
I like that. And on that note.
Setting out, mic drop, that's a wrap.